Guys, let's talk some rookie wide receivers. Let's start with talking about the hits, and let's start with Drake London. Guys, are you doing Drake London or Marquise Hollywood Brown? An early 23 second and a mid 23 second.
Ooh. I was just kidding. That's Drake London. That's not even close.
Hollywood and a playoff 23 first or Drake London.
Playoff? No.
Drake London over a projected early 23 first.
Ooh, now this is where we start getting interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Drake London. We got a little bit of a baseline there. Scott, go ahead. What are your thoughts? He's looking pretty good, no?
He's looking very good, and I don't think we can necessarily project him to look a lot better than he's looking. Third in the league in target share at receiver. I don't know if that can keep up, but clearly he's done. I mean, put it this way, if you just want to put it in comparison's sake, he's done more in 3 games than CeeDee Lamb's done in his career. Just from like a target earning market share perspective. Now then you have to apply, can that sustain? Can it sustain if they add another weapon? Can it sustain if they change quarterbacks? You know, can they sustain that if they have a better offense in general or they spread the ball around more? I mean, there's a lot of questions to be asked, but I think, you know, you have a guy now that we're all about the 23 first. I still want to have 23 first, but I also think you can win with Drake London. And he's basically a high 23 first or more value, or 2 firsts of value that you could package in a trade. If you have Drake London, let's say you have one of these like middling teams that you think could do some damage, but you're not sure if you're a year away. I don't hate trading my top 5 first next year for Drake London, if you can even do that, which I don't think you can. You probably have to add in a piece. But then you can kind of hedge your bets on like, all right, if he helps me win, fine. If he falls back a little bit, okay. But I still have like the dominant currency other than just pure draft picks. I have what every team in the league may be chasing. Rebuilders want guys like Drake London. Contenders would love him too, because it's like, man, I can still compete with him in my starting lineup.
Yep.
So I think that's the biggest thing that we've probably learned right now about the rookie receivers this year that I don't think we saw coming, is that these ones we're going to talk about today have actually, you look at the teams that are winning, it's like, man, a lot of times I've been going to try and trade for these guys, and then I look at what team they're on. It's like, yeah, that team's 2-0.
Yeah.
Why would they trade a guy that's helping them win? This isn't the situation where it's like, okay, let me trade him, you know, Devontae Adams for Drake London. Drake London's pounding Devontae Adams in points. So
Exactly.
Why would I want to even entertain a deal like that? So I think it's, you know, these guys, when you hit, it's like Chase last year, like Jefferson the year before. I'm not saying he's there, but when you have him, it's like, man, the contenders want him too. Everyone wants him. So that's the type of asset I want on my team.
Shane, what do you think, man?
I still think you could probably get him, depending on the league, right? You could still get him for a Devontae Adams or maybe a Tyreek Hill, because there's always going to be people that go, well, it's only 2 games. He's a rookie, blah, 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 blah. Like Devontae Adams has proven over 467 years that he is a wide receiver 1. And I mean, that's true, but that's partly why we want to trade him, right? He's 31 or he's 30 years old, whichever. He's over the age.
He's a lot.
He's old. Yeah, he's ancient. So I would still attempt to do it. The other thing is you can't really, if you're trying to buy Drake London for picks right now, you're doing things really ass backwards. Like you're not going to be able to do that. Like you can't coming off of, well, basically 3 really good weeks. The only reason that you would go trade for him right now is that if you think he can ascend to the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level, and this is the cheapest, you know, it might not be the cheapest you could have ever gotten him, but it's the cheapest you'll ever be able to get him for some time. Other than that, it's really difficult to advise anyone to go out and try to get him.
Drake London and Damian Pierce, or Javonte Williams and 23 seconds.
I'll take Damian Pierce and Drake London. I would trade Javonte Williams for Drake London.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so it's really like, yeah, I mean, would you take 2 seconds for Pierce? I mean, I guess, but it's not a trade that would motivate me to go and send. There's not enough juice on either side to make me say like, all right, this is really, and I'll take the L on this a little bit too. We're undervaluing just how much the Dynasty community as a whole is into just basically getting off of any running backs that hold value. We've been right about that, like trade every running back. But I think we also undervalue just how much of an impact the receivers would have. Even if they don't continue to have this impact, probably undervalued how much they could have and how the community will react, because the community needs something to value, right? 23 picks were already valued at their peak over the summer. They need something else to value. It's either like elite quarterbacks, 23 picks, and then what else? And it's like, well, by default, it's going to be receivers. Because here's the thing. I'm trying to take some 23 picks now to buy the receivers when I probably could have bought the receivers in the draft for a 23 pick. So you're having to go the ass backwards way to still get the same players you would have targeted.
I will say this. So I'm happy that I did trash the shit out of this class, right? But I ended up with a ton of these rookie wide receivers because I was like, you know what? I kind of want to take a bunch of shots on them because I did like London. I did like Burks. I did like Wilson. I did like Moore. That hasn't worked out yet, but we'll get there in another day. But yeah, you're at the place now where you're like, shit, I do need to trade a 23 first for these guys because I don't know what the rookie class is going to look like next year as far as wide receivers, if that's what I need. Part of the reason everyone's willing to move off the running backs right now is because of the 23 class. They know, like, if I get it early 23 first, I can spend it on a running back that's going to be better than this anyway.
All right, so guys, next we're going to do Garrett Wilson. But first, look down, hit that like button if you would. If you're enjoying this content, we'd appreciate that. That's the easiest way to help us out. So, guys, Garrett Wilson or a mid-23 first?
Wilson.
Yeah, I'll take Wilson. I liked Wilson. Like, he was my wide receiver one of this class. So I'll still take Wilson.
Wilson or his teammate, Elijah Moore?
Wilson.
Wilson, yeah.
What if it were Elijah Moore in a couple seconds or Garrett Wilson? Still Wilson?
I think I'd take Wilson. I do think if I could get Elijah Moore in a first for Garrett Wilson in a second, I would consider it. Because the thing is, like, Elijah Moore's usage it's been great. And then you compare the fact that if you're going to give him credit for targets he earned last year, you have to at least say, I mean, okay, maybe he's not better than Garrett Wilson, but he's not bad. So, like, you can argue they probably may end up in the same bucket to where they're a lesser version of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, where, like, if you really look at their careers side by side, like, Chase isn't 50% better, like the market might say, probably more like 10% better. So, like, I'd be willing to bet on the Elijah Moore side, but that's, you could argue his market share is down because Garrett Wilson's there and he's stealing targets from him.
Part of the problem with the usage for both of them is they're both being used incorrectly. Wilson's been used too much out of the slot. He should be used more as an outside receiver, and I hate getting technical because that's not my bag of bones. I'm a Dynasty Trades guy. But, smart people that I'm reading and smart people that I listen to are telling me that their usage is for both of them is just incorrect. You got to figure that's going to course correct, right? And the one thing you have to take into account, too, is Zach Wilson's coming back, right? Zach Wilson did have a really good rapport with Elijah Moore last year. So we don't know that we're not going to go out there and see Garrett Wilson throw up a couple donuts. It's just so far, Garrett Wilson's target share compared to Elijah Moore's it's not even close. He's absolutely housing him. He came in there and he's the number one wide receiver, even though he's not playing the most snaps.
Garrett Wilson or Deontay Johnson, straight up?
I'm not going to move off Deontay.
I think I'll take Wilson. Better
Just
currency, man.
He is younger.
For market value?
He is younger. But look,
currency.
I just want to put this out there, right? So I just tweeted this out earlier after looking at the targets for the season so far. One receiver has had double digits targets in every game this year, Deontay Johnson.
Yeah,
I think the other thing is the Jets have thrown the ball the most in the league, 156 attempts in 3 games. So, like, the Garrett Wilson sheer, people are going, oh, he had 14 targets in a game. I mean, look how much he smashed. My biggest concern is his market share is just under 22%, which relative to other players isn't great. But I think that kind of speaks to the fact that they have, they do spread the ball around to a lot more players than we would like. I mean, we talked about that with the Jets. Like,
even Conklin's eating.
Conklin and Corey Davis are both producing, plus Elijah Moore, plus Garrett Wilson, plus 2 running backs that have 15-plus targets. I mean, they're spreading the ball around more than you probably want. So with Zach Wilson, you're not only going to need him to prefer Garrett Wilson, you're going to need them. Do they really want to throw the ball 52 times a game with Zach Wilson? Probably not.
No.
So there's a lot that could change, and it kind of says, like, there is a sell window for Garrett Wilson now, whereas there could be a buy window in 6 weeks. I guess the thing with Deontay Johnson is when can you not get the Deontay Johnson for Garrett Wilson deal? As long as Garrett Wilson's seen as having a successful rookie year, doesn't that feel like a deal you can get until next spring? Unless you think Kenny Pickett's coming in and is just going to dominate with Deontay Johnson. I guess that's the risk, but I don't know. That's a fair deal, though.
Okay, so guys, we're going to go over to Chris Olave, but first, if we earned your business, would you mind hitting that little subscribe button down there? At the time of this recording, we have just under 3,000 subscribers. 3,000 won't really give us anything except for maybe a little warm, fuzzy feeling inside, but if you enjoy Dynasty content and you're enjoying this show, hit that subscribe. Okay, Chris Olave, guys, he's looking good. Scott, we'll start with you. What do you think about Olave so far?
Stud.
Better than Garrett Wilson?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, so here's a couple things that stood out to me about Chris Olave. So Chris Olave ranks 16th in the league. You think 22% is impressive? How about 26.1%? Second thing is, I know these guys are old, but he's kind of pushed inside 2 historic target hogs too to do it. You know, like, is Michael Thomas what he used to be? No, but he's still good. Is Jarvis Landry what he used to be? Heck no, but he's still in the league. Like, that's the kind of guy that'll be able to get 15% market share until he retires, just because that's the way that he plays. So I think it's impressive that I think there's part of the narrative on Olave is, oh, he's going to have trouble getting targets because he has 2 guys that are just going to get a bunch of low A-dot targets. But not only is he racking up the air yards, but he's getting more volume than those guys. Now, they're both hurt right now too. So, I mean, I think if you have Chris Olave, you're going like, you know, and the problem is a lot of the people that have Chris Olave were probably the contenders in the league, you know? Like, if you kept your 109, 110,
right,
like, you got Chris Olave, and it's like, shit. The team that didn't need to get the early producer is getting it now. So that's the team that has all that flexibility to move around the board. You know, you can go to a rebuilding team that just happens to have Stephon Diggs or Cooper Kupp, and you're just like, hey, you want to trade me Tyreek Hill for Chris Olave? And 26% market share as a rookie. Are you really going to turn down Tyreek Hill for Chris Olave? Like, you might ask for a second or a second and a third, but that's an appealing deal you can make with a team that is struggling, that is looking at this like, I might have just replaced Tyreek Hill with like another receiver that's almost as good, and I get a couple picks. Like, that's a dream deal if you're the soon to be 1 and 2 team that's, you know, is stuck with one of these receivers that's smashing, but is maybe a little too old for your build. So I don't know if it keeps up, but I think right now you'd put Chris Olave at wide receiver 2 in the class. Maybe you can take Garrett Wilson over him, but I think he's ahead of Burks. He's ahead of Dotson. Clearly ahead of Sky Moore, George Pickens, Christian Watson, Jameson Williams, obviously. But I don't think you could take him too high. I could have had more shares than I did, and I just was trading out of this range. So he's a guy I've been trying to get back.
Let's do the 23 first check. So Shane, Chris Olave or Christian Kirk, and a projected mid 23 first.
Kirk in the first.
I mean, you had to bring in another guy that's basically eating targets.
Who's eating targets, right,
just as much as Chris Olave. So, I mean, Christian Kirk's at 25.6. So, you know, you could see him having a Christian Kirk type impact, just doing it at a younger age. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's the kind of deal. If you can get that, then you're feeling better about getting that extra first, because I don't think you're losing a whole lot from a production standpoint.
Well,
you went heavy on the first one, Clay.
No, but that's good. I mean, so that's the type of deal you should be trying to throw out there.
Yeah.
If you're going to move any of these rookie wide receivers, capitalize on the hype, right? Capitalize on the early. I don't want to say hype because they produced. Capitalize on the early production, right? Because generally, early production does mean that a wide receiver is going to end up being good, right? It's 3 weeks. You know, if Chris Olave goes out there and donuts for 4 of the 5 next week, then we feel a lot different than him. But if you are going to trade him, I mean, things look great right now, but if you are going to trade him, yeah, you've got to get maximum return. It's got to be Christian Kirk in a first.
Did you do that for Drake London?
Christian Kirk, it's got to be a little stronger than Kirk.
I was saying, so we're clearly establishing there's a gap between Drake London and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing about Drake London is he looks like, and I know they all had competition, whatever, right? But he looks like the one that of the 3 is going to be the absolute target monster for me. Not that they won't all be highly targeted. They won't all be productive. It's just Drake London's the guy that I can see getting 160 targets because he went there and basically, you know, the only other guy that was there last year was Kyle Pitts, who saw every target. And then this year we have to beg Arthur Smith to actually target Kyle Pitts because he forgot he's on his team because of Drake London. But yeah, getting back to Olave, if I'm going to cash out, it's got to be a first and Christian Kirk. It's got to be someone I can use. Like Christian Kirk is easily a starter.
We're moving over to Jahan Dotson from my Washington Commanders. What are your thoughts on him so far? He was looking good, had kind of a dud week this past week, but thoughts? He's looking pretty good, no?
Yeah, the one thing about Dotson is he's had a very high touchdown rate, touchdown reception rate, which really boosted his scoring. He hasn't been as much of a target hog as the other rookies that we've discussed. He's, matter of fact, ranked 63rd, less than 15% target share, which for a rookie is good. Doesn't pretend that he's portend. Yeah, I think that's the word. Doesn't portend that he's going to be some kind of like just absolute monster in that offense. But I think he's going to be good. And what I do right now is I'm using him, capitalizing on those touchdowns and trying to use him in another rookie and getting a more established receiver. But if you want to hold on to him on your roster because, you know, he can be a solid wide receiver 3 or 4 for your team, I like that.
Did you try to tack on a mid 23 first to Jahan Dotson and try to get up to Drake London? Give that a shot? Yeah.
I'll give an example of a trade I made last week in one of my many leagues. And this is before, obviously, yesterday's game was Jahan Dotson didn't score a touchdown to boost the scoring, but I traded Jahan Dotson and Sky Moore for T. Higgins. Because I knew, look, Jahan Dotson by himself, I knew wasn't going to do it. So I was like, I got to throw in another asset. Sky Moore might not be playing well right now, but I know that people still like him. So that was the asset I was willing to move with.
I think a guy that Jahan Dotson looks a little bit like, and not as a player, they couldn't be more polar opposites. If you compare his rookie year to Chase Claypool's in 2020, where Claypool was clearly a number 3 receiver, yet he came in, he was good enough to get on the field. Like he played a ton, but he had a ton of touchdowns, right? He ended up with only about 17% market share as a rookie. That's the way Dotson is trending. So then how does that project going forward? It really just depends on, you know, how Washington continues to build. But I think that it's good enough to get him in the door and say he's going to be a viable receiver for the rest of his rookie deal, potential to get a second contract and be a viable rookie receiver plus a second contract. But then what's the ceiling? I've seen people compare him to like Tyler Lockett or Brandon Cooks. It's like those guys were like, if he has one of those careers, then you definitely hit with Jahan Dotson. He's already come in and basically done the same thing as Terry McLaurin through 3 weeks. And Terry McLaurin is a good NFL receiver. He's a wide receiver 3. It's like, that's what Dotson is. But if you can package him in a deal because people are saying, oh, he could be just like Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson, like I would bet on those guys having a chance to finish a tier higher than him unless Washington just finds a golden situation and they get their, you know, Aaron Rodgers and he just smashes, you know what I mean? That's how, but I don't necessarily see that happening for Washington. I think they're going to be too good to get an elite quarterback, but not good enough to where like an elite quarterback's going to be like, I have to go to Washington. So he's probably just going to be a wide receiver 3. So if I can add him in a deal while he's still a rookie and he's not Chase Claypool or Brandon Ayuk, which they're as good as Jahan Dotson, yet do people really want those guys that much? No. So I think the time is to strike and throw him in a deal. So I think he's definitely a thrower in a deal versus a let's build around.
So you don't like him enough to give a first? Like you wouldn't give a 24 first for him? You'd rather see him hit more and pay up later? Or would you give a 24 first for him?
What do you think on the market, Shane? Because like if I say, hey, I'm offering you a package deal, you can either have my 24 first or Jahan Dotson. What is the average manager going to take? Which
24 first.
Okay, so if they're going to – I think that's the thing. Like I don't want to give up the pick because I don't know if the player is just an immediate – like if you say I'm willing to trade Drake London, you can probably start pivoting in like the elite quarterback range or the elite tight end range. Like you can probably at least count on him as being like worth 2 firsts value in a trade for a team that doesn't want to just trade for like all picks. Dotson, it's kind of like, I'd rather have the first. So I think that's the difference between them on the market. So I'd probably prefer any first.
Miles Sanders and an early 23 second or Jahan Dotson?
Dotson, that's not cashing out enough for him. Like Dotson isn't the one that I want to do a 2 for 1 for because the pieces I'm going to get back are not strong. Miles Sanders is, we just saw, what can happen to him, right? When he doesn't have a ton of usage, or I mean, he actually did have usage, but he doesn't get receptions. He doesn't score touchdowns. Dotson isn't that piece. Dotson's a guy I want to add to and get better. He's one of my consolidation pieces. If I'm breaking him up in two, then it needs to be like a start 14, and then Miles Sanders in a second looks appealing to me. But otherwise, I don't want Miles Sanders in a second, or any type of Miles Sanders-ish player in a second.
Makes sense. So, guys, we should give a minute to Romeo Doubs, Shane's favorite player. Shane's favorite player to mess up his first name on.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on him so far, Shane?
Dude's producing, right? Like I don't want to say I didn't think he would, but I didn't think he would. Although of all the teams, like I could see this happening too, where they drafted a wide receiver early and one late, where the late wide receiver was going to be the one that you really want. It was going to be this situation. He's their wide receiver 2 at worst, right? He's going to be the one that's going to be in there in 2 wide receiver sets. Lazard's the only one I think that Rodgers even trusts a little more than him, or at that same level. I mean, Christian Watson hasn't done anything and he's been injured. He's produced so far this year. Originally he was one of those guys that I was like, look, if you can get a second for him, trade him. I'd actually hold on to him now. I'd need 2 seconds to move Romeo now. I got to say, I'm coming around on him. It's hard not to, right?
17% market share for a 4th round pick. I mean, here's the thing. Did you like Terry McLaurin? Did you like Gabriel Davis? Did you like Hunter Renfrow? Like, these are all guys that have had early flashes, and like Hunter Renfrow flashed early and then he kind of faded away and you thought he was buried. But then I was like, well, he's earned targets before. It's going to come back around. If he's any good, he'll earn them again. I've made mistakes a lot of times on these late day 2, day 3 receivers. And it's like, I can't believe they're any good because they're bad picks process wise.
Right. Yep.
But I think you had to pivot to Doubs, and I bought a lot of Doubs before the season for this reason. He's going to get opportunity. He's basically what we wanted Jalen Tolbert to be. Yep. He's going to be on the field. He needs to fire in the first month. If he doesn't, he's dead. Jalen Tolbert couldn't even get on the field for the first 2 games. And then, apparently he's going to be playing in the 3rd game. But, like, he's the kind of guy that has a limited window, because once they go back to full strength, if he hasn't established his role, where does he stand? I think that's the thing with Doubs. Like, he was going to get opportunity because Allen Lazard got hurt. Christian Watson got hurt. He had 4 games to hit, and he's hit. So I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be like, yeah, I want that guy out there because I think he gives us more upside than Randall Cobb or Amari Rodgers. So I think you got to buy now, though, because this is the inflection point. Like, he could fade to nothing, but I think if he has a couple more good games, he's at least somebody you can get a second for next year. But there's a shot that if he's the next McLaurin or Gabe Davis, like, he rises up in value even more. And I think the last thing, he is tied to the best quarterback ever in terms of elevating his players. I mean, look how many guys Aaron Rodgers has elevated from day 3, UDFAs, didn't think anything of their profiles, and it's like they put up a wide receiver 1 season.